So this is a special meeting of the Concord Municipal Light Board. Today is July 7th and it's 7 p.m. And we are meeting again this evening by Zoom, which has been the executive order issued by the governors a year and a half ago has been extended, allowing us to do so, which is very lucky for all of us that we could convene here. So I call the meeting to order. The agenda for this evening is quite specific. It's short, and it's to receive a full debriefing on the broadband outage that happened a week ago, and to sort of start thinking about our role as the light board of what we need to do to make sure that we are exercising our fiduciary responsibility as well as our oversight on managing broadband for the town. So I'm not going to talk anymore. I think Dave and Greg and others have far more information to share with us, and I'm going to ask Dave to take it.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for getting on this meeting tonight, kind of on short notice. We appreciate it. I think what we want to do is kind of walk through what happened. I know I sent you guys kind of a technical rundown, and it's hard to follow all that. But Greg's going to run through each step of the process to give you a better understanding. Stephen, I don't know if you want to say anything beforehand.
Yeah, Alice, if I may. So first thing I want to say is we deeply regret the outage, and not only the length of it, but the intermittent nature of it, the uncertainty surrounding it, and the lack of information that really was forthcoming from us during the outage. I can tell you that as Greg and Dave will articulate, it was not for a lack of effort. It was not for a lack of concern. We knew immediately it was a big deal. And we put all hands on deck, but as you know, there really isn't that many hands. We're fortunate to have a relatively a robust broadband business, but it is operated by a relatively small number of people, supported by some vendors, but mostly on the customer service side. And so I think while we were trying to figure, and the other thing is the target just kept moving, and I think that's I did issue a statement today that was really it was from me, but really it was the result of a lot of collaboration with Dave, Greg, our IT director, Jason Bulger, who was also very helpful in trying to problem solve and get us out of this situation, and our PIO, Aaron Stevens. So all I can say is I've never really been a part of many crises in my career, unfortunately. I've never been a part of one that was so technically complex, that had variables, like major variables, shifting as fast as they did, and that I felt so helpless, really, to even add any value into problem solving. And so, as I've said from the very beginning, I know there are plenty of customers who are upset with us, and they should be. We are upset. We are upset at the situation. I don't think there was any. It wasn't like somebody broke something at CMLP and caused the outage. It was really. It was a result of a few things, as I'll articulate, but it was really an unfortunate circumstance, I think, of us trying to make improvements so we have a much stronger, more resilient broadband network. And the first blush at it obviously wasn't very successful. I think if I can analogize, and then I will mute myself. If this was, and actually this happened last year, where a car hit a telephone pole and caused damage to a fiber and knocked out internet service to the high school and I think some of that area of town. If this was that kind of incident, a pole falls down or some kind of switchgear fails, and we know it and it's localized and that's the thing, that's easy. We send out a notice, we've got a pole down, fiber's out, it'll take 12 hours to repair, we should be back online by this time. And we deal with those not regularly, but those are the ones that are easily and more predictable. This was very, very different. And like I said, every time we thought we had it on, it went back off. And like I said, I've never really been a part of something that really just moved so fast and just seemed just beyond our reach for most of it. That's not an excuse. We still should have let the community know we're still chasing it. But I think because we were so, myopic about trying to fix the problem, we didn't do as good a job of letting people know what was going on. The statement that we put out today is intentionally non-technical. Because I think Concord has a lot of technically savvy people, and so there are a lot of subscribers who will want maybe more detail. But I think the majority of subscribers aren't as tech savvy as you would need to be to really fully understand the details of this. So I think if you want more technical information, details, you're happy to ask us, or you're welcome to ask us. But we tried to make it as non-technical as possible, but it was an extraordinarily technical problem that really caused the outage. So again, all I can do is say I'm sorry again that we just really didn't do a very good job in this incident.
Thank you, Stephen.
All right, Greg, you want to walk through the events?
Yeah. So Friday night we had a outage due to a physical fiber issue. That physical fiber issue was between the police station and the town hall, part of the fiber ring, and that affected the Commerceford, Black Horse, and some of the Nersdack Hill area. Also, unfortunately, it also affected the police and radio fire emergency radio system. So that was our main goal, to make sure we got that back up and running prior to anything else. But the fiber issue, once we traced it, found out where the break was, and changed the pairs over, everything from that came back up. We are still, we just got back in as of Tuesday, obviously. I was on all weekend just monitoring the broadband network, dealing with some of the odds and ends of people who hadn't called in or didn't realize whatever. So we were just trying to focus on getting anybody and everybody up that we could. So we're still not 100% positive, but when we made the fiber switch, one of the switches seemed to think there was a topology change. And though there wasn't a physical topology change that occurred, it was literally a fiber swap. So after we felt the outage was completed we were up and running again, we started getting calls, and the people who had different types of classes weren't getting the IPs from this DHCP server. And when we're looking into it, at first it was one class, then it was another. The server was not doing what it was supposed to do, and we attempted multiple times over the weekend to reset the services, bring it up. It looked like it was running fine, and then it kept failing. It forced us to put a server on that wasn't ready for prime time, and that started bringing up the different classes bringing back the classes that we saw down, and then started causing some issues with another class, like a residential class. As we continued and realized then it was, again, without getting crazy into the technical, we realized that server had not been ready for prime time. We went back to the old servers so we could resolve the issues with the server we just placed on, and that was rebuilt. And unfortunately, that caused duplicate IPs to go out to the network. So it took us a lot of manual work to go and find those duplicate IPs, delete them, bring new leases to the customers, and bringing people online. So the rebuilding, bringing the servers in and out of service, etc., just continued to kind of causing a cascade of issues. When we did resolve the issue. We knew we were set. There were two uplinks we have, and one of the uplinks on the new server wasn't responding. So we ended up recreating a whole new configuration and deploying that. It was a clean configuration. We were trying to use the old configurations, and which seemed to be, a little quirky, but we weren't quite, but we thought that was the best way to get the outage finished. Once we were cleared and we had the new server up and running 100%, everything was clean. We were back on the 20 gig uplink. The outage was completed, or was over. Muted.
Yeah, there are some questions from board members. I saw Gordon's hand and Brian's. Gordon, you want to go first?
For the record, what were the dates that we're talking about?
So the 25th was the fiber issue between the police station and the town hall. And then the dates with the DHCP server, we found that on Saturday morning, and we responded immediately on Saturday morning. We thought by noon the issue was resolved, and then about 3 hours later we started getting calls again and realizing there was another, it was continuing. So so the time for us, we're trying to diagnose the issue during the weekend. And it was on Monday that we started moving toward a different server. Again, that wasn't quite ready, and that continued to cascade some issues.
We've got to fix the motion sensors for the office.
Okay, Brian.
Once Greg is back.
Yeah.
So Greg, you said there was a fiber issue that started this process. Was it a physical malfunction, or so what I'm trying to understand is the server switching, was that done because of a fiber break instigated the switching or the upgrading of those servers because it was planned anyway, or was this a planned event that didn't go well?
No, we had no intentions of, it was not a planned event in any way. The fiber was definitely matter of fact, I had the technicians go and shoot the fiber today and confirm that what we had switched over was still bad. We could actually see something from one side, but we could not see it at all from the other. We think that issue now was a connector in the light cabinet. But
Yeah, Brian, just to add to that, the server that we had in store, we were replacing the ones because they were way past end of life, 2008 servers. So we were building those. They weren't ready completely, but it was part of the solution. So we were trying to be proactive, and didn't work out.
So it sounds like there was this connector issue that you didn't know it was a connector at the time, but you knew it was a fiber failure. And then to solve that, you shut down one of two core switches. Is that?
No. To solve that, we just simply switched a fiber from one fiber to another in the light cabinet.
Okay.
And that brought up the radios and Commersford and Black Horse Place and the Nares Neck Hill outage.
And at that point, the system was stable?
We believe it was. And then we think what had happened, whether there's a topology change, according to only one switch even saw it. We're not, seem to be, we're still investigating, to be honest. We're not positive on the.
So the immediate fiber problem was solved, but solving it left a single point of failure that you were trying to address, or why did you take the next step to swap out the servers?
Because it was malfunctioning on Saturday. Yeah.
So there wasn't
malfunctioning. It was taking out a class of one class of customers, and But so we, at that point, we didn't think it was a problem. We just figured it was a rebooting of the service. We did it a couple times. And again, that's why we really tried to work on that on Saturday and Sunday before we realized this was failing. It was not stable.
Yeah, so the original fiber issue is not related to the server issue. They were just happened to be timed pretty close to each other, but there were two separate problems.
That's what we're believing at this point. That's correct.
And so then to solve the second problem, I had read the email, but trust me, I am not a nerd on broadband and how it operates. So can you explain how give us the basics of how it's supposed to operate and highlight the redundancies in how it's supposed to operate? Could you do that?
How it's supposed to operate. I mean, so we have different classes of people on the broadband network.
Okay.
We have what you call static IP. We have people that are businesses. A lot of times they have their statics. And then most of your residential customers will have a DHCP address. And that's something that is the server manages. It leases it out for an X amount of time. And then it goes and it releases, if that device isn't using it anymore, it'll put it back into the pool for somebody else to come grab. So the lease there, we could really get into the weeds on us looking at the network. There were some issues that the configurations were.
Well, it sounded like that dynamic system of giving out IP addresses was what failed and required the work to be done. So there's physical and then there's software. So can there be two, like if there's, I'm going to simplify this and sound real dumb. If you've got a water system or an electrical system and you need redundancy, you build two pipes, you install two wires. In this case, we have two servers, but they both run this DHCP functionality. Do they run them separately or in unison? In other words, can you shut one off and the other one can take the load, or is this a software that is a single point of failure?
There is redundancy built into those two routers.
Okay, but but in this case, when one failed, the other was not able to pull up the slack while you worked on the first one that failed.
When the one failed, it wasn't giving out the DHCP addresses the way it should be, and they basically the software in that situation was not doing its job, and we don't know. We still aren't 100% positive why.
Yeah, and I think I'd just add that, in terms of level of detail, we're still looking at this. And while I think we've identified most of the known failures, can I be 100% certain there's not some unknown factor that's a part of this that I want to be conscious of as we discuss the details of this? No, I cannot be 100% certain that is not something out there that we're just not aware. I mean, I'm not a tech guy, Brian, either, but I just watch the news, and it's a funky time in cyberspace right now.
So I guess I'm going to ask a different kind of question for all of us here. And that is, I understand it's to a very lay person, it sounds like catastrophic failures from top to bottom, things just kept cascading and going wrong that we weren't prepared for. So my questions are more about what have we learned from that? I mean, the things that come to my mind are the need for redundancy, the need to have emergency operations ready to go. I mean, did our emergency communications all go offline for here and Carlisle? What is our responsibility and how big? And do we have the right consultants on board to help us when we need it, or do we rely on our own staff? I know we have a very small staff. I'd like to hear the lessons learned about how we move from here. Will there be a forensic analysis so we kind of figure out all the weaknesses in our system and try to start building a plan to address all those weaknesses? I mean, it was scary for me, who I admit am not very knowledgeable about all the tech talk, to see that we were allowing equipment to be at the end of life. And and in that end of life redundancy, it was also our redundancy was at end of life. So not knowing, technology, that causes a layperson to worry that we haven't quite hardened our system enough so that it can withstand a single failure, let alone a whole bunch. So I'd like to hear the lessons learned if we have some, or how we move forward from here to think about learning from what we know now and how we go back and do the forensic analysis of where, what if the fiber just breaks somewhere else in the line? Is
So-
the fiber good? I don't know. Yeah, you
So
get where I'm going.
Yeah, so Alice, to your point, we're in the process of doing an after-action report, and it's going to show all, the stuff we did well, the stuff we didn't do well, areas for improvement, action items, and what priority they have. So we're working on that right now. I wouldn't say that, it's 100% done. It's basically in draft 1 form right now, so it needs some work, but we have learned quite a few lessons. We did have a third-party consultant in to look at our configurations, and they were kind of surprised by the way they were and made some suggestions that were very good, and they helped our network engineer actually get the new server up and running. So we did have another consultant in today that we talked to because we do want to do a good deep dive at the architecture because we know based on what the other consultants told us that, some of the stuff's a little different than it probably should be. And then, I believe Stephen put in his thing, in his note today that we are going to do a forensic look and, just to make sure no one was behind the curtain, so to speak. We don't believe there was, but I'll let Stephen speak to that a little bit if he wants to.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just, I threw out, we they could see what was in front of them. But again, I think it's really just given, where we are and the time of the times we're in and some other variables that I've seen. I just think that we need to do an investigation to see, just to make sure that we're not vulnerable in ways that are just not obvious. In terms of lessons learned, there were lessons learned from a software and equipment standpoint, but then for me, the lessons learned are obviously operational. And in my intro, I did neglect to note that I did send a note out, and I did not, offer, an opportunity for input by this board. I'll be honest, I did send it out before I was able to send it to the select board. We were under a lot of pressure, as you might imagine, from people who are really dissatisfied with the level of communication. And our focus was, we just need to tell our customers what's going on. And I apologize for really focusing. Like I said, we got the good thing is we are able to focus very well. The bad thing is sometimes that focus takes our eye off of other things. And our focus was just, we have to let the community and our subscribers know what's going on. And that meant that went ahead of what would I think be considered the typical protocol. So I do owe this board an apology for that. And I think on July 26th, we'll have it, the select board will have this as an agenda item, and I'll relay the same to them. So in terms of lessons learned from an operational standpoint, I've said for months now that broadband has really been part of our operation that has really lacked attention. It has worked well. We have serviced it well. Greg has come on and managed it, but he's also been looking at deploying a new phone system for our town. There have been some phone issues from time to time in different departments. And so this kind of organizational development that you would normally see hasn't really occurred in large part because of COVID-19 and the time we've spent responding to that. But like an emergency communications plan to let our subscribers, to tell our subscribers, if you're not getting service, check here. And I get that people are like, well, if we don't have internet, how can we check the website? But, most people have Twitter on their phones. We also, it's the same thing, like we have email addresses that we could send out, but, we may look at creating a phone basically a phone list, if you will, using our code red system for just subscribers. That people don't like getting those calls, and we're always really cautious about not using it about using it for non-emergency issues. I don't think we do that with electricity. We do text messages and things like that when we have outages. We don't call people. And so we have to really think carefully about how we want to do that. But the plan, I don't think existed. And so not only did we not really know what to say, we didn't really know how to really communicate that in a way that we had told our subscribers was going to be the way. We did build that on the fly, but so we need an emergency communications plan that's clear and consistent. I do think we need to develop a stronger relationship we do have plenty of third-party vendors that we trust, but we do need to make sure that our vendors are clear on what their roles are when something happens. We have a third-party customer service vendor for broadband, and we have a different one for the light plant. Well, the message, even that, like people calling the customer service line and either not getting an answer or getting a bad answer is also, everything the technological stuff is going bad, and then we can't even get the humans who are working with us to say the right thing or pick up the phone. And that was another part when I say cascading failures, it included that too. And we're getting that information second, third hand, after it's already happening. And so then we're scrambling to try and get them, flying right. And so we need to make sure that we have more regular communication with our vendors so they know when there's an outage. This is the message you use. These are the things, this is what we want customers to hear. All those basic things that we just did a poor job of. And we have those for other departments. So it's not like we're going to, reinvent a wheel here. We just hadn't built it for broadband. And I think that's, I'm not going to make any excuses. I'm not, and if this sounds like me trying to, find a silver lining, it's not. But I will give you my assessment that I think there will be positives that come out of this, negative experience. I think we have learned a lot, and I think we're going to be a stronger, organization as a result, and provide much better customer service.
So I really appreciate hearing that, especially since I think all of us on the board have received emails and phone calls of complaints as well. And you've touched on everything, at least that I've heard: poor communications, where's the redundancy? How do we know the system is trustworthy? Who's working? Who's doing the work? So I think you have heard, I'm sure, from all the people who had called in, all these same things that we have. And it's nice to know that you've actually heard them, so we don't have to go through all the complaints that we heard, because they're all the same. And you've captured them extremely well. I think the hard part is for us to think about how do we move forward, and what are the costs of moving forward, so that we can, as a board, look at the cost of running broadband as it is, and what systems improvements do we need, both in consultants as well as our own systems, to make sure that we have reliability of the network. I guess it's called hardening the network, that we've talked about in terms of climate change, but I think we're talking about it in a bigger scale here. And being able to know that we have trusted consultants who are on board and be willing and able to jump it when we need it jumped. Before we can think about expanding our network, we need to get what we have in place pretty well defined.
I think we have a good team, Alice, if I may. I don't think it was a lack of trustworthy consultants. It was a scramble, and there was so much uncertainty about what was happening, and what was happening kept changing. So I don't want to suggest that, even once we contacted our customer service vendor and said, no, this is what the deal is, that they did start to give out better information. And so we did course correct on the fly, but there are things we should not have had to course correct. And so I'm relatively new to this, as you all know, but I do sense this. I do see the pride that that CMLP has as a department, and our community has in being better than Comcast, and Concord Broadband being better than Comcast. And when we have a week like we had, where people were like, they're worse than Comcast, that's terrible. That is a terrible place to be. But I think I just want to remind people, we don't have the level of resource that Comcast has to address problems. But we also don't have millions of customers. We're not a global corporation. And our only concern is providing great service to our subscribers, which are predominantly Concord residents with a few exceptions, with some intermunicipal stuff, but it's really Concord residents that are our subscribers, and we want more of them. And so to sit here with you today and say we made Comcast look good is something I never ever want to have happen again.
I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, Brian.
So I've accumulated a few questions, but one of the questions I haven't heard kind of discussed, and you mentioned level of resources that Comcast has. Greg's role, you described how it's split between the broadband business and other responsibilities. Should that role be solely focused on the broadband business? And should we get another person to handle the other half of the load?
So I think I can answer that. It technically, so when I came on board, I literally came on board 2 days before COVID became a pandemic. My charge to come on board was to grow the broadband market, work with customer service, work with the team, and really focus 100% on broadband. We were also obviously minus a CIO at the time. And so I helped Dave, because everything was on Dave, broadband, IT, and of course, his real job, the director of the plant, to just help offlift any of that. And one of the biggest concerns was the telephone system. My background is PBXs. I've installed them for 25 years and programmed them and done everything with them. So at this point, I believe, and now with Jason on board, he's a really smart guy. He knows his business inside and out. And I think I'm helping him and literally passing off to him what I've been focusing on, that is rewiring the fire department and some of the major buildings and the phone system. So that actually is part of the plan.
I mean, we've had some vacancies, Brian. I'll answer that a little differently. Everything Greg said is spot on. Part of the reason why his focus was diverted is, and when I say broadband didn't get the attention because of COVID-19, here's a very specific example. Our phone system, we discovered, didn't allow for adequate forwarding for remote work. So while we were on lockdown, our desk sets weren't forwarding to whatever number we chose. And that was a failure of our system, or not failure of the system. It was a deficiency in our system. And so we immediately, and we're talking March of 2020. We immediately said, Greg's got the experience with phones. We need to get a new phone system so we can handle this in a better way. And so he started immediately working on that. And so and there was stuff like that all the way along, whether it was VPN licenses or computers, or there was so much we did that this group did for COVID-19 response. But the point is, now that we're finally coming out of that, we are looking at who do we have working for broadband? Do we need more network technicians? Do we need, do we need a marketing manager? I mean, these are the things now that we now want to get to, but just haven't been done because of the pandemic.
And Brian, to that point, we do have a vacancy right now for a network engineer, another one, a second one. So, that's something that's going to be starting the recruitment here pretty soon.
Because I know you have
that we need two, so.
Yeah, so I mean, in the broadband business, how many headcounts are there? I mean, there's a very handful, I believe. So when things come down, when an issue happens like this and it cascades, you've got to have those handful of people solving the problem. The communication and other things is necessary for them to communicate out. You need the resources there to handle those situations. So I just want to make sure that, and I know you're thinking about this stuff. You guys are doing a good job, but I want to make sure that this business becomes more resilient, more reliable, and that it is resourced appropriately for the revenue it's collecting.
So what you just said is, one second, Gordon. What Brian just said is, to me, the crux of what we're talking about, and that is, do we have a sustainable business model that can support the costs and infrastructure of providing this service to our communities? We offer extremely good value, and we have been really reliable up until probably the last couple of months. So I'm just wondering, shouldn't we look at the business model to say, how many customers do we need to support the staffing and consultants that we need to have on board, so that if there's ever this kind of failure again, we have all the resources we need at our fingertips to deal with it. So my question is, builds off Brian, it's about developing that, what is that sustainable business plan, that model that works for the town without bankrupting us? So that's my general question. I think Gordon has a question.
So Gordon, I'll give a general answer unless your question is similarly themed, then I can hold off.
Gordon? He's
So-
yielding to you, Stephen.
Yes, and you're muted. So, I guess I'd say to a general question, the general answer is, I think we do have a sustainable business model. I think we have had a sustainable business model, and I do not think that the incident that we just had is a indictment of, I think it's clear that we needed another network engineer, and we have that. Like I said, we have that vacancy. Shame on us for not prioritizing getting that recruited and filled. The new network engineer we have has been brilliant and really worked, Herculean hours to really help us out. And he's relatively new, but I do believe that our model it is workable with our third-party vendors. I think, like I said, what those relationships are and what we expect from them may be adjusted based on what we have here, and we may decide we need more. We may need additional, people in-house, but I don't want this to suggest that we had a failure as an enterprise. Structurally, what we had was an extraordinarily complex, rapidly shifting outage that we've come out of. Like I said, it took a while, but I don't want to. I do think we are fundamentally sound, and we're not really that far off.
Okay. Great, thank you. Gordon, did you have a question? Yeah.
It was interesting comparing notes with my brother-in-law, who is a municipal employee of Breckenridge, Colorado, and they offer broadband to their residents now. It's a city that's quite a bit smaller on average, so to speak, than Concord, but during ski season, it's quite a bit bigger. They're offering 100% coverage throughout the whole town. It may not be as big a town as geographically as Concord is, but they're sublet. They're basically what's the word for it? Contracting it out. They'll own the infrastructure, and after the end of a period, they can renew the contract or find someone else to come in. And that does give you a throat to choke. You can maybe even, when you're doing the contract, talk about things like 5 nines and guaranteed availability and so forth. I'm not suggesting that here, but it's just something to think about. That is the extreme end of of the whole idea that you actually are doing already of getting in good consultants and contractors for specific tasks. But as a member of the board, I like the fact that the conversation has moved up a little bit to just kind of the strategic level, and some of the things, and I appreciate what you're saying, Steve. I do agree that this is a viable business, and that we're basically on a reasonable path here. And one of the things I'd like to think about is whether or not when we actually do achieve a higher scale, like maybe offer the service to a higher percentage of the residents, that will increase the scale of the business and then also support a larger staff. And if maybe that would actually be a better place to be, and maybe that would be a benefit of trying to get there quicker. Or even, and finally, the last thing I wanted to say was that we've had a focus on profitability and of the idea of return to capital, that the capital for broadband was basically provided by the light plant, and then some of that capital is now being returned. Maybe we might want to revisit that and think about using that capital to build and not get to profitability quite as quickly.
Yeah. You want to go, Stephen?
Well, I think, I don't know if we're going to say the same thing, but I was going to mention ARPA funding, but if you have something different.
Yeah. So you might recall in the audit 2 years ago, the auditors basically said to us, you got to come up with a plan for repaying the borrowing that you borrowed from the electric fund. So we did that, and it was found acceptable, the terms that we put together. So we'd have to really be careful with taking that money and putting it back in, because we already committed to something with the auditors. So.
Yeah, I
Yeah, and
remember
that's
that.
why, yeah, so the American Recovery Plan Act has broadband, expansion of broadband as an eligible expense. Now, the details are still a little grainy on what you can specifically do, but because we have our own broadband business, that's really very, very high. Broadband as a vehicle for economic recovery and economic vitality is really kind of top shelf for me, top of list in terms of how we are evaluating our use of those funds. So over the next month or so, we're going to be working internally to develop, a series of recommendations that will, or a plan really, of what we think would be the right way to go. And we'll be, talking to the select board about that, and as it relates to broadband and maybe other infrastructure issues to the light board as well. But that I look at as an opportunity to do exactly that, Gordon. Make some capital investments that are strategic for economic recovery, but also system-wide benefits for the long term.
And
Right.
that was what I wanted to mention, is the procedures that we use for maintenance and for switching over from one server to the other. I know this was not a planned event, but it would be good to have those procedures laid out, and have the resiliency of, multiple systems. I go back to the 2 pipes, 2 wires, one goes down, load goes to the other. Whatever that is for broadband, it would be good to see any delta between any net income reinvested into that kind of resiliency in the business. That's what I like to see. I mean, I understand the loan payment and the auditors. That's got a plan that exists. Shouldn't touch it, but we should take any excess that we have and reinvest into the business for resilience.
Yeah, and the redundancy, Brian, is part of our plan. It has been all along. So when we went out and purchased the new servers, we have 2 of them. So it's supposed to fail over. So that's the case, with the the services we get from third parties. We have, sufficient speeds from different vendors in case one goes down. So we've taken care of a lot of that, but it is always part of our design piece.
Right. Gordon has another question.
Another thought I had was just about the communication piece. I watched this unfold on Twitter. I think that was I assume that was one of the better platforms for following all this. The next time this happens, it could be an attack. It could be the Russians or the Iranians or whoever deliberately trying to bring us down. And so then, okay, so what I'm trying to say is that I think we'll do a good job, think about it, do a little better job of communicating. I think that we'll want to have some planning for redundancy, but also planning for like what happens in an attack, and in the context of an attack, what are you free to tell the other side, the enemy? And I'm sorry to be so, apocalyptic when I describe it this way, but the bad guys could be listening to us. And are there risks that we take by being explicit about what we're experiencing? So anyway, it's a challenge.
So cybersecurity, we know, is something of great import for all of us, for our electrical system and our broadband system. And we know that Dave and others in town are keeping a keen eye on that. But you're right to continually bring that forward, because that's a significant risk.
Well, I mean, Gordon, it's like I said, I'm like, Greg outlined the sources and the known issues that we had, but I just, how can you not be a little, paranoid about it in the times we're in? So we do want to look at, are there ways where we can harden that part of it as well? But I think that especially over the past year, we've really invested a tremendous amount of time, energy, and resource into cybersecurity, because we realized that we weren't where we needed to be. And really, it's really been a 2-year journey. But we've really worked hard to really improve our game in that regard. And that's what makes something like this so disappointing.
Yeah, and I think I just want to paint a picture of my team just real quick where we were at just before this happened. I have on my computer, I have multiple quotes from vendors, from Cisco, Juniper. So we went out because we've been looking at replacing what went wrong. It was, so that's one. The other is what I have been doing over the last year is looking at all the fiber, both the legacy, what they consider legacy fiber, and the fiber network that was put in by CMLP, and to identify all of our paths. And so I truly have an understanding. And my team is also out there right now shooting all the open fiber we have. So we have a plan exactly for these situations.
Great.
So
That's good to hear.
what we're doing. And Jason Bolger, when he came in, and Victor, we're looking and identifying any possible holes that create these concerns that we're discussing right now.
That's great to hear.
And-
Brian.
Yeah, it is great to hear, Greg. And I want to make sure that you have the resources to do that kind of analysis and understanding so that you're prepared. And that's my concern, is that, I understand you know a lot about phone networks, and you can help out there and that, but it's the preparation for these events takes a lot of time. And I want to make sure you have that to make the reliability of the business go up.
Right. Gordon or Brian, do you have any other comments or questions before we open it for public comment? We've been now talking for 50 minutes. I believe we have a few folks in the audience who'd like to ask us questions. Not seeing hands up. Okay. Let's look at Carlin Reed has had her hand up for quite a while. Thank you for being patient, Carlin. You can now speak.
Thank you. Carlin Reed, 83 Wits End. This has been a really good discussion. I live in the Nursnack Hill area, and I noticed two things. First, thank you very much for the response and for the bill credit. I appreciate that. It's not a whole lot of money, but it is noticeable, so thank you for that. The second thing is that it looks like on June 25, when this whole thing started, there was a report by the Concord Police Department of a motor vehicle collision on College Road in Nursnack Hill area that brought down a tree and power lines. After that road was open, I drove by and saw the downed area, and I'm wondering if that might have had a physical impact on starting the fiber cut. If so, you might consider, when you're doing your forensic look, to look at the physical locations of key telephone poles. You mentioned the one from the high school. This may have been one. Strawberry Hill is known to be an area for automobile accidents. And in fact, factor that into your look. That's all. Again, thank you for the really good response and the communication, especially Greg's work and Carol's work. Thanks much.
Thank you,
Thank
Carlin. David Allen.
Good evening. And for goodness sake, thanks. Let me offer you a perspective from the person who started this whole bloody thing 24 years ago, 1997, going on a quarter of a century now. Someone for whom this is a very important part of my legacy. Here's the big picture. There was an abrupt change in the leadership of this group something over a year or two ago. Over that period of time, a most spectacularly successful startup against all sorts of odds had grown and was in front of us. We know, and incidentally, is not a comment about anybody. Certainly, Greg, thank you so much for your efforts here. My God, man. Nonetheless, and of course, there was COVID in there. Not so long after that change, we've had a calamitous disaster here. This thing has grown strictly by word of mouth marketing. Let me tell you, I run a little list over here in our 100 home Canantum area. One of the people on the list said, I take back every nice thing I ever said about broadband. We are completely dependent on good odor in Concord. And this offers to create the possibility that we will not only not go forward, but we will go backward. This is a calamitous event. Give you the perspective of somebody who has, in fact, run a public network. If there's going to be an outage, at the most, you're accepted to have it down for 6 hours, something like that. And it's announced in advance. And it's in the middle of the night and people know. And certainly if it gets worse than that, you get out there and you get in front of it. We ran a little volunteer DSL system here in Concord for a half dozen years. We know so damn well. You ask anybody else who runs these things. My focus is frankly on the light plant board. 3 of you are here tonight. There are 5 of you on the board. I am more than concerned that you get this wake-up call and that you take completely in hand what your responsibilities are going forward. We could lose this. All the nice talk here tonight doesn't mean that this is going to succeed now. We are severely damaged in the town of Concord. This board needs to take the bit in its mouth. Everything should be on the table. It's been brought up here tonight that, and I'll say it out loud now, this was started with 10% of the funds that you would ordinarily have for a startup. The prior CIO pulled it off most amazingly. But we may be at the point when we've got to seriously put more money behind this and get people in here. That's money. There's people. Greg, for goodness sake, you bring this extraordinary experience in phone. This is a network problem and all that goes into the complexities of a network. We've got to look at our people. I'm looking to this board and I can guarantee you I am not the only voice on this subject. As has been said, this is a town of super high-end tech folk, which we had around us since not only when we ran our little DSL system here. They very much have their eye on us and how this board acts to move us forward in this. You can tell I care in a most fundamental way about this. This is my legacy, one of my legacies. Very, very damn important. Anything we can do in the community to help, we will. Please, let's get all 5 of this board reared up and let's ask the big questions. Again, I appreciate your inputs tonight.
Thank you, David. Peter Nelson.
Oh, hey, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear
Great.
you.
Hey, Peter Nelson here, 52 Cottage Lane. Greg, I think I spoke to you at various times throughout this outage. And I just want to, I've got a couple of comments. I'll be brief. Thank you all very much. I appreciate your comments and thoughts about this. I want to reiterate, whoever, I'm sorry, I missed the name just before me. This is a network issue. And at its root, it sounds to me like you guys were experiencing a routing problem, frankly. And the questions that I've got are, do you have an incident response plan? Do you have that?
When you want to elaborate? When you're saying an incident response plan, as far as
An incident response plan that describes what you will do when certain outages occur, who gets notified, what do you do, when do you start pulling in resources? It's how do you behave, what do you do when an incident happens? And it's no, I'm not criticizing, but it's a good thing to have because that establishes who you're going to communicate with. You can tell people in advance. That's one thing. The other question I had is this. it sounds like you're going after the redundancy thing from a purely hardware perspective. And I would say to you to please think about the architecture and design of this network prior to thinking that it's all hardware, because a lot of your resilience and redundancy is frankly in the software, it's in the routing. In the nature of fiber is, you said it yourself, Greg, at the beginning, the fiber ring went down between the police station and town hall. The reason they call that a ring is that the fibers should be able to push the packets in the other direction when part of it goes down and get the traffic to the other side. If depending upon load, it'll be slower, but fiber, that's what fiber does. So think about the design of how this thing works and the architecture. And of course, that then relates to how you configure all the devices and put them together. That's it. Thank you very, you guys did I know there was a lot of pressure on all of you, and thanks for bearing up and being there. I've said a lot of good things about broadband. I was one of the first users here, and I've got TCP IP under my fingernails. 20 years of BBN for those of you familiar with it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yep.
I think we have one more comment, Sherry Seaver.
Sherry Seaver, 294 The Valley Road. I was also one of the people on that early DSL group. My comment is addressed to how you communicate out to us. And I just want to make you aware that there are quite a few of us, especially in Canantum, who are dependent upon network extenders, which means that when the broadband goes out, our cell phones go out. So we cannot get messages over Twitter. Just to make this one even worse, our landline was also having trouble at the time of this outage and was at very low volume. And we have a medically fragile person in this household, and we were very concerned about emergency communications. But in planning how you're going to reach all of us, if it's going to be an outbound phone call, everyone who has a landline, that landline probably needs to be part of that communication response, because when the broadband is out, we don't have cell phones either. That's
Thank you.
the point.
And I just want to add that many people don't have landlines anymore at all. I see no other questions from our participants. Any closing comments from, yes, Brian?
I just want to finish the meeting with some kind of idea of when will we know the next steps in this? What expectations would Greg and Dave like to leave us with for the things we've discussed, whether talk about procedures, manpower, or a rundown of this incident?
I think the next step is to finish the after action report. And that's going to give us a lot of takeaways on what we need to do, what areas we need to, beef up and that sort of thing. So that's the next step. And like I said, it's in draft 1 form. It still needs a lot of work. But I'm hoping, to be able to come to the next board meeting with, an update that is done, which is in a week, right? So
yeah.
that's my plan for that. And, I think that's the first step. And then obviously the other piece that we're working on is the third-party consultant. And, that's a big piece that we need to get in. And we got to go through a few different ones, but those are the two big pieces for me right now.
Okay.
Let's keep going out.
Yeah.
And how about when do you think, because I don't want to rush you on the communication problem, but maybe work on the breakdown of what happened and what you need to do. But before not the next light board meeting, but the one after, I'd like to know how we're going to deal with communication when we have these cascading failures of broadband and the handful of people who run the network are super busy at that moment. Who is going to step in, as a layperson, to just ask the question and then communicate out?
Yeah, so we've already discussed that internally this week and how we're going to do that. So we'll have an update on how we're going to be communicating in that regard. Definitely, by the next meeting. So there'll be another update on this then, for sure.
So I want to remind this board that we have all committed to having a broadband on our agenda at every single meeting. So we will have some level of conversation about broadband going forward on the meeting. I see no other comments, and I think we might be ready for a motion. But
Alice, just before, one thing that we didn't mention, and I think it's pretty important, is Carol's team, they worked on the phones around the clocks. And I can tell you, I've been through tornadoes, hurricanes, snowstorms, you name it. And I've never seen the phones ring like they did. It was literally one after the next, all day long, 12-hour days, whatever it was. And they did an excellent job, and they should be commended for that. So just
I didn't mean to ignore that, Carol. I know how hard you worked during this. So I appreciate it, all the hours that you put in.
It also shows the need for broadband. I mean, this is not a luxury. This is a needed service.
Well, the one thing pandemic has taught us is that we work at home, and so we rely on our livelihoods depend on the reliability of our network to keep us connected and keep us functioning in business. So just as we were about to close, a few more people have asked for comments. Let's hear from Henry Dane.
Thank you. I've listened to this whole discussion, and I just wanted to let you know that this is, by my presence, that this is an issue that's of great concern to the select board. The failure of the broadband is as significant and perhaps more significant than, say, a failure of electrical power, a power outage. The town could not have tolerated a power outage that would have gone on for a week. And I'm not sure it's over yet. I didn't get a clear statement that the problem has, operationally been solved. But this is also part of a much larger question that has to do with our communications facilities. We are famous for having some of the worst cell service in the world. There are probably many third world countries that have better cell service than we have in the center of Concord. And that is also not only a failure, but an embarrassment. And it needs to be addressed, and we need to come up with a real practical problem to deal with both of these issues. I experienced it from talking to people in the street who were affected by this. And if you talk about wanting to have an environment that is friendly to business, you have to understand that most of the businesses in town cannot do business without the internet, either because of their communications, or the retail establishments can't even make charges on charge cards for things they sell or services they deliver when the internet isn't working. This is, as I think, as one of you said, this is certainly not a luxury. It has become a necessity. It's an essential part of the environment in which we live and work. I want you to know that we take this extremely seriously.
Thank you, Henry. How about Pamela Dritt? We haven't heard from Pamela this evening. Her hand is up, and we have one more comment after that.
Thank you, Pamela Dritt, 13 Concord Green, Unit 4. I applaud all of your hard work. Thank you very much. I think broadband is an essential utility for the modern world, even though I personally don't have it. All of the investment that we make in this as a town should not be considered an expense. I think it should be considered the investment that it is. And my question is, how much of the broadband, the fiber optic, is underground and how much is on telephone poles? I thought it was supposed to all be underground, but obviously it isn't. How much is, and what are the plans for, again, putting all of our electric and broadband underground? Again, an investment, right? That pays off for us and helps business.
Thank you.
Thank you. One last comment. I think Sherry, did you have another comment?
Bill Seaver, 294 The Valley Road. I'm the medically fragile person, and I rely on Zoom because I have congestive heart failure. And that's the only way I can meet with a lot of people. The other thing I am is I worked at digital selling network management. And I want to emphasize that a phone network and a computer network are not the same beast. There is a whole, I want to say, imaginary layer is about the easiest way I can explain it. I'm a mechanical engineer. I used to manage networks using imaginary signals flowing over imaginary lines, managing the network. And there's this whole extra layer that is there that doesn't behave like a phone network. And I know because the phone company has been the last person to figure this out. I want to reemphasize the person that talked about a disaster plan, and also just implore on you that you need to get, I think you said, some network engineers. You need to get somebody that understands the software piled on this thing, which is just makes the physical network look trivial. That's it.
Thank you. I see no other hands raised. Oh, I do see a hand raised. Stephen Creighton.
I just have one quick final comment. And if I did not express this at the beginning, I thought I did when I articulated that we do this was a very big deal. What that meant was I don't view broadband any differently than water or sewer or electricity in terms of its importance as a utility. And I'm sorry I didn't convey that strongly enough. I agree with those comments.
Without, I see no further comments being asked, so I'm ready for a motion. Fine.
I move that we adjourn.
Do I have a second? Gordon. All in favor? We have a roll call vote. Gordon,
Aye.
Brian,
Aye.
Alice, aye. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for coming and meeting this evening. I know it was a short notice and I appreciate you altering whatever plans you had for the evening to join us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.